What do we bring to this equation? But more importantly, how is this shaping our systems and our institutions to perpetuate, racism in America? Because the attitudes are one thing, the beliefs are one thing, but the practices that are in our institutions and systems are what we are really faced with.
Yes.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did you want to add anything?
No, I fully agree. I guess what's important and what the legacy of Dr. King is also not to give up hope. We have struggle and we don't give up hope. There's a vision. He gave us a vision and we continue to work toward that vision.
And can I say one additional thing that really helped to give me hope? Because years ago, when I was, going around the country and speaking on a lot of college campuses, it seemed that there was a very complacent generation, indifferent, very self-centered. And we've seen some of that turn, the tide of that turn. But when I discovered my mother's words, they gave me comfort. She said, struggle is a never-ending process. Freedom is never really won. You earn it and win it in every generation. And when I thought about that, I realized that all of us, meaning every generation, is called to this freedom struggle. Now, an individual in the generation may want to opt out, but the generation is not exempt. And each generation has to make their contribution to this human struggle. And some of what has been taking place has really called us back to that struggle because we left it, and we opted for being fascinated by all, as Daddy called it, the advancements in science and technology, but our ethical and moral selves have lagged. And so we had to be called back to center, and in some ways, I believe that there's a reason for President Trump. Because, we would not be rallying like we are now. We would not be having conversations that we have refused to have in America. I don't even think the whole Me Too would have occurred under another administration. So as horrible and terrible for, many people that feel like, oh my God, this man is horrible and terrible for the nation, the way he speaks, some of the policies may be that, but at the end of the day, it's waking us up to who we really are, and we have to be very persistent in this hour, and we can no longer continue to be on the surface with a lot of stuff like we've been before, and I feel excited about the opportunities that we're now presented with. And when, people that are pulling together and working together that never worked together, and, the coalescing around issues, as I said, the things that we've just refused to face as a nation, and now we're not going to be able to shake it, because a person like that is forcing us to deal with ourselves, because he reflects some of the stuff that we don't like. I mean, just let's be real. Yes. He's like a mirror. He's like a mirror, reflecting back. And like, oh, that's horrible. Is that who we are? We don't want that in America, no. And we go to work.
So I wanted, as I was preparing for this, I was thinking about these two men and these two women who happen to be sitting here right now. And of course, you had father-daughter relationships. And I thought, what would both of your fathers find encouraging that's happening right now? And I had this idea, it's like, would they embrace Twitter, do you think? Do you think, your father might have a Facebook account or an Instagram?
My father actually has a Facebook account.
Well, yes. you think they would have embraced the technology? Do you think they, what do you think they would have found encouraging happening right now?
Outside of technology? Or
Yeah,
the
outside, yeah.
I think for my dad, it would be just the young people, the activism of the young people, because that's really what the movement was. It was a collection. Yes, there were adults. Obviously, Montgomery bus protest was, mostly adults where it all started. But I think he would be encouraged that there is a generation, as we call it, that's woke, because he talked about remaining awake through a revolution. That was one of his messages. And these are revolutionary times. I don't know what the change is going to be, but there's going to be change. Because there's just a zeal now in these young people that I haven't seen. When we were in college and we were dealing with the whole apartheid issue, I think it's a different zeal now than even when we were dealing with that. And maybe it's because of Facebook and Twitter, and Instagram, et cetera. So I think, yes, he would be encouraged by that. I think he would take advantage of the technology, but he would caution us as well about technology as he did back then.
And your father?
Let me just say about technology, my father couldn't drive a car. I think when he changed a light bulb, that was a big thing. He had no sense of such matters, but I think he, so thank goodness for my mother or me. Yes, my father writes on the first page of one of his books, God in Search of Man, that religion declined in the modern age, not because of the challenges of science or philosophy or technology, but rather because the religious message had become insipid.
Yep.
And I think he would be very glad to see that, in fact, the religious message that we're hearing in churches and synagogues has changed. It's not insipid. It's full of energy and determination. I know my father also used to tell me over and over, never despair. Despair is forbidden. Despair implies that you don't believe that God is present. So never despair. And I remember that over and over again these days. I think he also would have been very glad, as you said, about the young people and their energy and their conviction. He had a message once in a television interview when he was asked about young people, and he said, remember that your life is something very special, very precious, and turn it into a work of art. Make your life a work of art, something beautiful, something extraordinary. And I think these young people are taking that to heart, that life isn't simply about sitting back and being entertained. It's about doing something for the good of human beings, for the country, and that's what they're doing now. So I think he would have been very, very encouraged by what we're seeing, even as we see a wave, actually, of anti-Semitism throughout Europe, for instance, and in this country as well, which I'm sure would have been profoundly upsetting to him as someone who fled the Nazis.
Well, Bernice, as you said, the struggle for civil rights, the struggle for justice and freedom is constant, and the war is never won. Even when we win certain small battles, as you said, we have to do it over and over and over again. And I remember my mother telling me that you never win it. You have to keep going in and fighting that battle again and again. It may have a different face, but it is the same struggle. And here in Milwaukee, we live in a city that is still very divided by race. Much has changed for the better in the last 50 years, even in the last 12 since I've lived here, but there's so far to go. And so I know we have a lot of younger people who are in the audience today, and I want to kind of leave this with, what do you say to them when the going gets and stays tough?
Well, the first thing is a simple thing. You don't give up, because you can look throughout history that we're very resilient as a humanity. We've had some very dark, turbulent times throughout history, and we were able to overcome and transcend. I think that's why that song was so important in the movement, we shall overcome, we shall overcome. I do believe deep in my heart that we shall overcome. You know, that's the first thing. You know, look, that's why we can't disconnect from history and believe we are the generation that is beginning everything. We are actually perpetuating and continuing something. The second thing that I would say is, you know, study that history. Learn from the people, because we have examples, modern day examples. I think there's a reason why God allowed some of these people to still be here, the Andrew Youngs of the world, the John Lewises of the world. I mean, when you think about one of the principles of nonviolence, that unearned suffering is redemptive. And you think about a John Lewis who this, you know, not this calendar day, but this weekend in Selma, Alabama, some 53 years ago, beaten on that bridge, left really for dead, and fighting for the right to vote and to have that vote protected, now serving in Congress. I mean, he probably didn't even imagine that at the time. And then not just serving in Congress, but serving under the first African-American president for 2 terms. Unearned suffering is redemptive. So that means struggle is not easy. There is sacrifice. We each in every generation have to sacrifice for another generation, and these young people have to understand that. We've done them a disservice because we wanted to make it easy for them, and so we've kind of, you know, unfortunately helped develop, you know, generations of young people who feel entitled to have something, you know, different than what we had. No, the reality is they too are going to have to struggle. They too are going to have to sacrifice. But that sacrifice is not going to be in vain. They may not be the recipients. Now, John Lewis is fortunate. My daddy wasn't the direct recipient, but I'm the recipient for what my father did. We are all recipients of what they did in the 50s and 60s. So that's the second thing that I would say to them. And, you know, as Gandhi said, be the change that you seek, and find your, you know, your friends, find those who are part of the struggle, connect with them. Don't ever disconnect. You're not in this alone. Don't ever think you're alone, because there are many people, regardless of what it looks like. There are actually more people of goodwill than we realize. But the people of goodwill